Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gents, to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. I am your humble host, Mike Rosado, here today with another power-packed episode for you to listen in on. Today, we have the honor and privilege of speaking with the incomparable Claire Keane. Claire's earliest well-known works was following her dad Glen Keane's footsteps at Walt Disney Studios, working largely as a visual development artist for such films as Tangled and Frozen before taking the leap as being an independent children's book author and illustrator. Getting critical praise from such esteemed publications as The Washington Post, Publishers Weekly, and The Wall Street Journal. We couldn't be more pleased for this brief moment to talk about her life as an artist. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our chat with Claire. Welcome, Claire Keane. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. How's California treating you these days? Is it blazing hot, or what's the weather like?
It's honestly it's so back and forth. It's really weird. It'll be like really cold and then it'll be really hot.
Right.
Having a hard time adjusting.
What's really cold in California? Is it like 40-degree weather, or is it 60?
No, it's like 50.
Oh, okay, right.
55.
Yeah. So, firstly, as I usually like to do, I like to get a little bit of an origin story of all the different artists that we speak with.
Okay.
And since you've got so much history there, for the listeners out there, Claire is not only an illustrator, fine artist in her own right, she also is the daughter of Glen Keane, who's, if you've been living under a rock, I'm sorry to be rude, but if you've been living under a rock, Glen Keane is one of the great animators of animation history in general, but particularly probably could be known as maybe the 10th old man in terms of the
I'm sure he'd love to be called an old man.
And then in addition to that, if that wasn't enough, you also have your grandfather, who was the creator of the Family Circus, one of the greatest comic strips of all time. So in some sense, you're kind of part of pop culture royalty. So in some ways, you're kind of a Disney princess come to life, which is pretty cool. So, that's right. That's exactly right. And just FYI for those listeners out there, I want to invite Max, who's our producer. As I've mentioned before, Max rarely comes to speak in the podcast, but he also is a podcast host himself with the NCF&B podcast. And
I've been here the entire time.
He really has silently
from episode 1,
waiting in the wings. But he's also the father of 2 little girls, so he was excited to potentially chime in on some of this conversation here.
I've seen everything that you've done. Millions of times.
That's so wonderful. I love to hear that.
So let's dive right in. So tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up. I understand that you started basically drawing around 18 months, very, very early on. Obviously, this is something that seemed to be a little bit of destiny with your family heritage here, and it seems like it would be almost the exact opposite of what most people would expect, where you've got your parents telling you to be a lawyer, pressuring you to be a lawyer or a doctor, and now for you're probably being pressured into being an artist, which is the exact opposite of what most people would have. But tell me a little bit about that.
Luckily, it came naturally. I guess I can't really. I mean, I don't know what it's like to grow up not like that. So it just felt like. I mean, it was just kind of being raised around pencils and drawing, and it was just so natural.
Yeah.
It's funny because I always kind of just assumed that it was because I was raised around pencils and seeing my dad draw that, like, it gave me the desire to do it. Mm-hmm. But then when I had my daughter, or my firstborn, she was really into drawing as well. And in more than other kids her age. And I started, and then my second, he is also really into drawing. And it's not like I was drawing as much as my dad was around me when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I realized that I think that there actually is like a DNA in there that like, I don't know what it is, but it's something that kind of maybe like the passion for it or something, the desire to do it is kind of just innate. And then having the encouragement around me growing up was kind of what like pushed it into something more substantial. I don't
Totally.
know.
Right. So you've got, I mean, obviously there are plenty of people who have artistic abilities who do not have that support system, which obviously can many times hinder them from actually fulfilling that passion, that sort of innate ability that that could sort of compel them to either take it as a career or have it be a hobby of some sort.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is. I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling now that I have my own kids.
Certainly. So both of them are artistic. Is that right? Now I know you have a daughter.
Yeah.
Her name is Matisse, right?
Yeah.
Is it safe to assume that that's one of your influences as an artist?
Yes, he is.
Nice.
Matisse and Roman.
Nice.
Matisse is 10 and Roman is going to turn 7 in a month.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about that. So you started picking up a pencil and drawing at around 18 months. And what was it like being in a home that was filled with art?
I think that it was such a wonderful opportunity to really connect with my dad, you know? I mean, I don't think that he has any problems connecting with anybody, and I think he would have connected with us regardless, but to have that special thing, like my brother also draws.
Yeah.
And right now, actually, he is developing a show for Netflix, and he's working with my dad.
This is Max, right?
At Netflix. Yeah, this is Max. Having that kind of, it's not a secret language, but like a thing that we could really all relate to was something special, I think.
Yeah.
That maybe not all families get. I would work all day on my drawings, and then my dad would come home and I would just like race at the door because I wanted him to go over my drawings and like correct it and help me like figure out how to draw my princess correctly.
Yeah.
And he was he was exactly the right person for that.
Yeah, he gives me the impression that he would be incredibly supportive. I know that even in the countless interviews that I've seen where people are talking about your father, it doesn't matter how busy he was. He always took the time to stop what he was doing to make sure that he was helping the people that needed the help.
Yeah, he's a natural leader, or like a natural teacher. And he's just so passionate about what he's learned. And so he just kind of wants to pass that on. And maybe I must have like picked up on that was something that he enjoyed doing. And so I did that because like now that I have my daughter and my son who really enjoy drawing, like every once in a while I'm like, oh, I should really like try to help them with their drawings. But then I realized like they have no desire whatsoever for me to go over their drawings. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to push it. So.
Right. Is that because they don't want mom helping, or is it because they are just kind of in their own little world and then they're just
in their world?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I also recognize that if I were to get in there, I'd kind of just mess it up.
Yeah.
But somehow my dad had a way of inviting curiosity.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And at what point did you realize that your dad had a position that was, of prominence, that people were, coming in the millions to go to the theater to see his characters?
I think I always just thought that. I mean, for me, like my dad was like the biggest thing in my world. And so it just made sense that he was like the biggest thing in everybody's world.
Sure. That's awesome. And how about your grandfather? I mean, your grandfather, obviously, he kind of paved the way in a lot of ways, I would assume, or would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, because apparently my granddad would do the same for my dad. He would put his work aside and help my dad on his own drawings. And so he learned how to, I don't know, kind of be that teacher, I guess, from my granddad.
Would you guys be spending a lot of time with your grandparents, or did they live close by, or?
No, we didn't get to see them as much as my kids get to see my parents, because they lived in Phoenix and we lived in LA. So we'd see them like twice a year.
Okay.
But then as we got older, my cousin is also an animator, and it was
this?
fun because my cousin Jason Keane.
Wow.
He was working at Blue Sky for a while, and so all of our family get-togethers, like we all have our sketchbooks, and it was just so, it was so magical.
Yeah, I was literally thinking that. I mean, I was imagining as I was putting together a number of questions to ask you, I was literally thinking about it. Family gatherings literally must be everybody in their own corner with sketch pads and, their dinner plates like placed on, night tables and stuff, That's pretty remarkable. So, so obviously your dad was a clear influence. Now, was your mom is also an artist? Didn't she work at Disney as well, or am I wrong?
No, I think you are confusing her with Lisa Keane,
yes,
who was my mentor and art director on Tangled.
Interesting.
And Lisa Keane, her name is spelled differently. It's Keene.
Right.
And everybody at the studio just assumed like she was my mom because she's right in between the generations, and so it was like we would always laugh about it. But she's a really good friend of mine.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you, I mean, obviously you had your dad as a major mentor and inspirational figure for you as an artist. But as you were growing into being more of a full-time fledgling artist, who were you starting to kind of keep your eyes on? Were there external artists that you were, kind of idolizing or looking up to or being inspired by?
Yeah, like as I was growing up, I was really just trying to draw like realistically, and so I was like really into Norman Rockwell and Leyendecker. Mm-hmm. And then my dad turned me on to Mary Blair, and I started like seeing that there's like other ways to draw too, and it's just been really great with Instagram and everything, just being able to access so many different people's way of drawing.
Game changer.
And it's huge, just like realizing like, but it's not even the quality of the drawing that is attracting me in some of these things. It's the idea behind it. Just things that I had no idea about before, and I don't know, my taste grew or changed or evolved.
Is it safe to assume that you were into Disney animation at all? Was that kind of a fascination for you, or were you? No,
that was kind of like my dad's thing. Mm-hmm. And for me, like Disney animation, it was for animators, and I never aspired to be an animator. And I never even thought that Disney would be a place where I would work. I didn't know that there were other jobs besides being an animator.
Right. Wow.
Really.
Wow. That's fascinating. I think in high school you moved to Paris, right? And I think this is around the time when your dad was working on Hunchback. Is that right? Or was it a different movie?
He was working on Tarzan.
On Tarzan. Okay. Gotcha.
But we moved there really just because he had a year off in his contract, a sabbatical year, and he just wanted to move to France. And after that first year, we just loved it so much, and he talked with the studio to see if it would be possible to do the character of Tarzan from the Paris studio.
Oh, wow.
And so then we got to stay more than that year, and it was great because I finished high school there, and then I went on to go to art school. I ended up living there for 8 years.
Okay. I'm sure that must have been just sort of a game changer in some ways.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was, looking back at it, it's crazy to see how life influences you and the people that you meet and the things that other people find inspiring, how that starts evolving your own tastes. And
yeah. Were there styles that, or at this point, were you kind of thinking about a type of career that you were looking at as far as?
Yeah. So actually, I had wanted to become a fashion designer. And so I went to Parsons School of Design in Paris first.
Okay.
And while I was studying that, I realized like, I really don't want to be sewing and learning how to make patterns. And like, I knew that that was not going to be the thing that I was going to be good at. And I also realized, like, I really just kind of like doing the illustrations of the drawings. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to be a fashion illustrator. And then I realized, like, well, for fashion, if I want to be an illustrator, then this probably isn't the best school for me. So and also at that time, I had been in American school in France for 2 years, and by that time, 3, because I had just gone to the Parsons School of Paris. And was
Paris. The American school still, was that just a sort of a standard academic, primary school, or was that an actual university?
Oh, the American School of Paris was, it was, it's a private American school.
Okay, gotcha.
In the suburbs of Paris. And so after Parsons, so all these American schools, and I was speaking English all the time, and I really didn't want to go back to LA without speaking French fluently. So I was like, I think that the only thing to do is like really get in there and go to like a real French school. And so my dad had spoken to a colleague who told him, the best school is Penningen. And it's really difficult, but it's the best one. And so I went with my portfolio, and they barely looked at it, and they're like, yeah. It really, and I realized afterwards that it didn't really matter, because the first year was your portfolio. Like, you spend the whole first year putting together your portfolio.
Wow,
and so it was kind of like this preparatory year. And it was intense. Like, the teachers were, it was French culture and French teaching at its harshest.
Right.
And so like they would put our drawings up on a cord, or our paintings that we've been working on for the whole week, and they would just like rip it to shreds, like verbally and literally. And they'd be like, "Oh, what is this merde?" And they would rip it up, and luckily I didn't speak French so well, so I was, but I could tell, like, I think they don't like that one that they're
the one that they're burning in the corner over there. I don't think that's that's getting much of approval, right?
Yeah. So that was an experience, but so after that first year,
did you find that to be helpful for you though, or
no? Yeah. No, I didn't. Like that in particular. No, I thought that it was just terrifying. Yeah. And but I was able to stick with it, and I was able to move on to the next level. And it was a pretty competitive school, and I think I was lucky to be able to keep moving up in the grades. And what I realized, so in the first year and a half, it's a very like traditional drawing school, which is what I was searching for. Yeah. But then as
with no specific focus at this point, did you have a major that you were leaning towards, or was it?
No, they didn't really have it. And well, it said graphic arts, which graphic arts in French. I was like, okay, that must be like a fancy way of saying drawing. Right. And then I realized that the school was heavily focused on becoming an art director for like a magazine, like typography and choosing photographers or doing photography and
more like in the graphic design realm.
Yeah, it was actually a graphic design school, and I had no idea what graphic design was, and it was funny because I didn't even realize the change really, but I just realized like, we're doing a lot less drawing, and then and while I was doing it, like there were people that were really good in graphic design and typography, and that was their goal, was to become these art directors of different fields. And so it just naturally, I guess it was just like I was embedded in this culture where like I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to become a typographer. Wow. And I was so bad at it, like really bad. Really? And I just was like, this is just not, I don't think I'm going to get a job.
Oh no.
And then and then for our final thesis project, they gave us free reign to do whatever we wanted, and I illustrated a fairy tale book.
Okay.
It was like this big fairy tale book that I printed out really large. And
assuming that you probably also incorporated the graphic design elements too, where you're laying out doing like page layout and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, I was doing page layout, but like nothing like what they had been teaching us. Like it was, yeah. And, but it was really, really fun to do. And I had so much fun. And also I guess the typography thing, like it really did make me think about like the type that I was using, because I had no idea what typography was before, or even how to think about type.
Sure.
So that was really helpful. And it's been really helpful ever since, because it's something I would have never thought to even think about.
Yeah. How did they respond?
So I did it. Well, how they responded was, there was one of the jury members that came up to me and he's like, your project is really beautiful. But I just wanted to know, aren't you a little embarrassed?
What?
I'm like, no. He's like, I mean, aren't you like 21, 22 years old and you're like doing fairy tales?
Oh,
and
I see.
I was like, no, I love fairy tales. And also the fact that it was illustrated. It was, at that time, it was just like illustration was, I don't know, just kind of
frowned upon
at the school. But it was the first time that I was like, oh, I didn't think to be embarrassed about it, but maybe now I should be. I don't know. But I was telling my dad, like, I just love doing these drawings for this book. Like, I wish that there was a job where I could just be developing, what characters look like and think, and what their environment looks like. I wish there was a job for that. And my dad was like, that job exists at Disney. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it's what I was doing on Ariel and stuff. I was like, wait, but you were animating. He's like, yeah, but before I animated, I had to figure out all of those things.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but that's part of an animator's job. He said, no, there's an actual job title that is just for that.
Sure.
And I'm going to need somebody for that on Rapunzel. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was weird to like have this discovery of like exactly what I wanted to do. And I felt like it was something that I had just kind of invented in my mind.
Interesting.
And my dad was like, yep, it exists. And it's like right, like right at home. Like,
yeah, wow.
Where you grew up.
I bet that was great for him too.
Cool.
He's like, just come home and work with me. I bet that was an amazing opportunity for him.
Yeah, can I chime in just as a little fanboy of the Disney movies? I got to ask, you have a unique upbringing with your family, of course, being rooted in animation and Disney. But as a little girl, you must have been enamored by the characters of Disney. So what's your perspective of drawing Disney characters at this point in your life? Does that seem surreal to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't see the characters that I'm drawing as Disney characters because they don't have that, like, I'm just kind of like working on a character, like I'm not thinking like, oh, this is Cinderella.
Right.
This is like Cinderella.
Yeah, but Anna and Elsa pretty much defined a generation, so that's a pretty big thing right there.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if I had known that while I was doing it, maybe it would have been, I'm sure it would have been a little more anxiety-inducing than anything else. But, yeah, I think kind of thankfully, I just don't think like that when I'm working on it. So, but when I was little, I would draw Cinderella all the time. She was my favorite.
So let's go back to that. So firstly, did you graduate there, or were you just like, okay, this is not for me, I'm ready to go, I got this awesome opportunity?
No, I went through the whole thing. Through the whole thing, and I graduated, and it was an amazing experience, and and obviously, like, I met some amazing friends and that I'm still friends with today. And
Awesome.
so that was, I graduated. And then after graduation, then I moved back to LA and ended up working at Disney.
And what was the feeling like at that point? Because firstly, you had this sort of epiphany that your dad brought upon you, which is like, you can do these kinds of things here, right? So there's that component. But then there's also like, I'm stepping into my dad's territory here. Was there any kind of fear of that in play at all?
I didn't think about it at the time. I was just like, I want to do that. And it just like, and then once I got there, I mean, working with my dad was amazing. It was, and it really did feel very natural because that was the relationship that we had kind of like created since when I was little, that I would draw and he would go over my drawings or he would give me critiques. And then I also just like realized another side of him that was, where he was talking about character and how I could contribute to character. And that just like really helped blossom another side of me that wasn't just about the drawing per se. It was about the idea of what the character was thinking and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So like it just working with my dad, it just was like so supernatural.
I bet. I'm always used to, when I like think of somebody like a Mary Blair, they're always known as a concept artist. Now when you started working there, you were working there as a visual development artist. What is the difference between the two?
It's the same thing.
It is the same thing. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why they've changed the title. I think it'd be so much easier if it was all concept art, but visual development artists can be a long thing to say.
There was a point in which they decided they made a concerted effort to just literally stop calling it concept artist and turned it into visual development artist.
Yeah, but I even think that Mary Blair was considered a visual development artist at one point, but maybe to make it more accessible to the public, they started calling it concept art. I don't know.
So how would you define what a visual development artist is at Disney?
A visual development artist is someone who helps develop whatever needs to be developed for the movie before it actually goes into production.
Okay.
And each artist kind of has their own roles that they play. Like one person will be really talented at clothes and figuring out like what clothes the characters should wear and how they would all fit together and the scenes and stuff like that. Another person might be like more inclined for color, like color scripts and telling the story through the different changes of colors between the scenes. And for me particularly, I kind of jumped around to all of it. But my underlying theme that I always found kind of exhilarating and kind of pushed me further was, so if I were designing like an environment or a dress, or something like that, like to be thinking about the character that those objects belong to, and to be thinking about why the character would be in that scene, or why she would be wearing that dress, or how she got into it, and where she was going later on.
Absolutely.
And so it was kind of like the development of the character that really kind of got me going.
That's amazing. So essentially your team, I mean, you guys are really creating the heart and the tone of what the movie will, or the characters, and also probably just the movie as a whole will actually feel like. Yeah.
And in the role of the visual development artist was a lot looser in the beginning. Like at the beginning of like Disney days, when they were just like, I don't know, 60 people working at the studio or something, where It was like the animators themselves were the visual development artists, and they would storyboard, they would develop the ideas visually, and then they would design the characters, and then they would animate them. And it was rare. Like there was Mary Blair who was called on to do just the visual development, but there were a lot of people like Mark Davis and Freddie Moore who would do their own drawings of the characters and their own development. And so it was kind of like, it was like a more fluid way of working. But now today the studio is so large that they've got departments, and there's less of a fluidity there.
But the beauty of traditional animation is that the concept artist, the Vis-Dev artist, many times has a lot more opportunity to actually see their actual artwork placed in the films themselves. Is that something that is kind of an issue for a lot of the Vis-Dev artists, where they don't feel like they're actually seeing a lot of their art now in the films?
I think yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily because of the CG stuff, but I think that it's just like, it's more like you do 80 drawings and only one will make a dent in the idea of what gets onto the screen. And so everything's removed, like everything's just very, there's just so much art that gets seen, I don't know, by like only like a handful of people, and then it just goes away in these drawers, and nobody sees it again. So that is kind of like,
is that crushing?
I have to say, yeah, it is crushing. It really is. And I think that when I left to do children's books, the idea of having my art in a book, and it was like that the art that I was doing and the things that I was saying with my characters, that was the product, and that it would actually get seen by more than just like my editor or whoever. But it was like the actual product, which is really fulfilling. But the idea about like visual development in CG, like I thought that it was really kind of a blessing to be able to work in CG, because you can do so much more in CG. Like if you're designing a dress, you can put so much more detail in there.
Right.
Whereas like in 2D animation, you can't. I mean, me in particular for Tangled, I had a really cool opportunity where my actual art was on the walls.
Sure.
And so I did get to see my work, which is, I recognize, a pretty rare thing. And so that was kind of special. Yeah,
absolutely. Is Disney, working at Disney or a place like Disney, truly a dream job? I'm sure this is subjective, but what is it like actually working at a giant studio like that with so much expectation?
Well, this is an interesting question that you're asking me right now, is because I'm actually thinking about going back at this time after having worked at home for 5 years. And I am like, I absolutely loved working at Disney. It was like they were some of my favorite years of my life. And I mean, while of course there are problems with working in a corporate environment, it really was a dream job. Like when I go back today and to say hi to people, or like if I have like a meeting or something over there, like I just feel like I'm back with family, which is really kind of something special.
Yeah. So it is a dream job.
It is a dream job. Yeah, I would say the corporate part, the HR stuff, the performance reviews, like it really kills it. Like it really does. But I mean, is it worth it? That's kind of the question I ask myself. Like, I think it is. There's also like it's very. Some people call it the golden cage, and the fact that you're given everything, and it's really hard to make the decision to leave.
Yeah.
And
How is it for family life and stuff?
oh, I've found it to be really good. The only problem for me is I live so far away that it's hard. The commute makes it hard. But like as a visual development artist, my hours are pretty good.
Oh, so maybe that's the route to go, huh?
Yeah, but for other people who are like on the post production or like in production, it's a lot. It's a different story.
Sure.
But yeah, the golden cage thing is a real thing, especially like when you start feeling like you want your own voice.
Sure.
And
that was
in a big studio like that, you don't really have your own voice.
Sure. And obviously that's to be expected. I mean, there's got to be one unified vision for the concept they're trying to put together. So that does make total sense.
Yeah, and to be able to embrace that and see the beauty in that is really key to be able to enjoy it. But at one point, and some artists, not all artists, want to do something that is more personal, and I got to that point.
Let's push into that, and then we'll circle back because I do want to ask you a little bit more about what else kind of drove you to potentially go back to Disney. You know, you don't really get a chance to have your own identity with your artwork, at least, you know, on the external for people to see. Was that largely the reason why you left the animation industry to do something like going into children's book illustrations?
Yeah. It's interesting to put it in terms of identity. I haven't really thought of it so much as that, although I could easily see that. Like for me, working on Tangled was such an amazingly personal thing. Like I kept a journal that was like documenting my life, and I would translate it into Rapunzel's life, and just trying to make this character feel more like a real person rather than just a cartoon character in a tower.
Yep.
But like somebody who actually had real things that she was doing. And so she really became very personal to me. And my dad works that way too. And he let me have free reign to work in this like very personal and visceral way. And
awesome.
And it was a very special project. And then after Tangled, I got to work a little bit like that on Frozen a little bit, but more and more it was, that little taste that I got on Tangled of really owning what it was that I was doing and just really getting into the character and having a voice in what I wanted to say with a scene or a movie or like
sure
a character. There was no going back. I couldn't go back to just designing for the sake of designing, but this desire to have a larger piece to say was just like a calling. And around that time, a children's book agent had contacted me, and I happened to have a children's book idea that I had just put together. So everything kind of fell into line, and it really kind of scratched that itch that I was having to be able to have my own voice.
Yeah. Were you terrified
Yeah.
to make that leap?
Yeah. I mean, it took like 3 years to fully make the decision.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where they say the golden cage. It's like, you don't want to leave. You don't want to leave. And saying goodbye to all these people that were truly my community and my friends. And, and since I lived so far away, it really was kind of just like a completely different life.
Sure.
But then at the same time, like I came home and I started working from home full time, and I loved it. Like I really do love it. I make my own hours, and there's something. I mean, I guess it's its own golden cage. I guess.
Yeah,
You're trying
absolutely.
to get away from it.
Yeah, and I have my own business too. I have a branding company, and I definitely remember leaving my comfy corporate-ish job as a graphic designer, and went out on my own. And it was a great feeling to wake up in the morning and still being in my PJs and walking over to my computer and just kind of getting to work. It was a great feeling for a while. But then I moved into, getting into an office to sort of make me feel like I was legitimizing what I was doing a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I never did that, but I've been tempted. Like maybe I'd get more done if I wasn't working.
Yeah, but that being said, let's be honest. I mean, you've cranked through probably about about 6 books, including illustration work for other authors. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so, interestingly enough, so I know you've got. I guess your first book that you stepped into was Once Upon a Cloud, right?
Yeah.
And this is sort of like a Mother's Day.
They marketed it as a Mother's Day book.
I see.
But it really wasn't, like, for me, like, the idea about the present wasn't so much, it wasn't as important as just this idea of, like, where does inspiration come from?
Yeah.
And in the book, she goes up to the sky and she gets inspiration from the sun, the stars, and the moon when she is falling asleep in her bed. And just the idea that our dreams, if we can pay attention to just that quiet stillness within us, there's a lot to be said.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I listened to another interview that you had, and you connected I guess it was kind of like the messages that you receive in your dreams, and then connecting that to the dreams that you have, like your passions and all that kind of stuff, and how they're sort of connected. Am I right in assessing that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure I said it better in a different, like at that time than I am now. There's something about our subconscious that's guiding us through to what we're meant to do, or that our passions lie deep, that they're in there, and sometimes, like, the craziness of life kind of gets in the way of that.
Yep. Often, more often than not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there was Once Upon a Cloud, and then I know there's a Fairy Friend, there's Love Is. I loved the Blue Day book. That's a fantastic book, not only for children, but also for adults. But my favorite one is Little Big Girl, which I think the artwork on there is just fantastic. It is definitely probably a little bit more along the lines of my style that I love to look at and also kind of draw similarly in that style. It has kind of like a, obviously sort of a late 40s, early 50s kind of vibe. Kind of feels a little bit like Bill Pete sort of feel to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really fun to work on.
The main character is Matisse, right? Your daughter?
Yeah. It's about Matisse becoming a big sister to her baby brother, Roman. Just this idea of, like, how a little person can influence such a big world around them. But it was fun to do because I was heavily inspired by my granddad for that. So it was fun to kind of live in his world, and I was drawing my family in the same way that he drew his family. Yeah. I just felt like I was, like, I guess, like, part of something larger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you find children's book illustration different than, in terms of your creative process, from working in the animation industry?
The children's book process, I guess, is less loosey. It's like less blue sky, kind of pie in the sky type thing. And it's more, like, very specific about what it is that, I mean, unless I'm writing a story, then I have to do all the same type of stuff that I would do in visual development. But if I'm illustrating somebody else's book, then the text has already been written, and so I've got those parameters to work within, where it's like, okay, I know that this happens, and then this happens. But actually, now that I'm saying it, there's a lot of times where I get a text and the illustrations that I start creating have their own story that I create. And so I guess I do visual development for that too.
Interesting.
But in general, like, a lot of the work is very kind of, it's more goal oriented. Like, okay, I know that I need to convey this specific emotion or this specific action and this on this page, and then on the next page it has to go to another one. So it's like more sequential and kind of organized. Whereas in visual development, it really is kind of like, okay, just get out as many ideas as possible and let's see like what sticks and what starts like really kind of generating interest in me and in others.
Sure. Now, in terms of like you being the illustrator and the author, do you typically let one drawing lead to another, much like some authors kind of start with some main characters and they have a sort of blue sky idea of what the story is supposed to be, but they have no idea how it's going to turn out? Is that kind of how it is for you when you're putting together a story for a children's book, where you're, letting it unfold?
Yeah, kind of. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit. Usually it has to do with a character in an environment, or like it might be an environment that inspires me. Yeah. Or, yeah.
Interesting.
Like for Once Upon a Cloud, I really wanted to depict the sun and the stars and the moon and stuff like that. But then for Little Big Girl, I just knew that I wanted to do something about Matisse.
Yeah.
And it was funny because while I was doing Little Big Girl, I was writing it and I was like, so I kind of got this like little big thing where it was like, she's a little girl in a big world, and like all of these examples of that in the illustrations. And then I was like, but then what happens? And at the same time, I had the other problem of like, but I also have another kid, and he's going to feel so bad that he's not in this. And then I was like, but maybe that's the whole point of the book, is this a littler person than her comes along, and now suddenly she's big.
So I think the last book was published through Penguin, right?
Yeah.
And I want to get some specific advice here to leave behind for some of the listeners here who might be interested in actually starting to create their own children's book. As you're thinking about your own process and how you let things unfold as they are, I would imagine that your history with Disney helped garner some attention through Penguin, your past experience, essentially. And so that allows you to have some room to let things unfold. For somebody who doesn't have the notable experience that you do, but would love to garner the attention of a publisher such as Penguin, can they still say we have a general idea, or do they need to be more specific about the kinds of storyline that they want to try and convey?
No, even I was pretty specific in what it was that I was trying to do.
I see. Yeah.
I didn't tell them like, I have this general. It was more like, okay, I have this fully fleshed idea, actually, when I came up with those. And then, actually, the first one, Once Upon a Cloud, I worked a lot with my editor, and she was amazing, Nancy Conescu. And she really helped, like, shape that story a lot for me. But, yeah, maybe I wouldn't have, had I not had the portfolio from working at Disney, they might not have taken on something that would have required so much finessing.
Yeah, sure.
They did pick me up for a 2-book deal. So then the next one, I just had to kind of come up with, and they said no a lot.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So you would come up with different themes and they would continuously say, no, keep working, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. Wow. Gosh, it's still so much more I want to ask you about that, but we're going to have to make that a part 2 at some point.
Okay, whatever you want.
Of course, I got to ask you, you said you were potentially thinking about going back to Disney. Is there a particular project that somebody has called you about, or is it just like just a innate personal tug that's making you think maybe I want to try to go back?
It's an innate personal tug. I also have my own project that I want to eventually do there.
Ooh.
And so in order to do that, I would need to go back and start that process.
Breaking news.
Well, I mean, it's not breaking news. It's just an idea. But
I'll take it. So that's great. So there is one, and I'm assuming that you're probably just trying to get in the door to talk a little bit about it. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm still debating whether or not I want to fully. It's a big decision. Decision, but one that I would have a lot of fun with, I think.
I'm sure you would. Well, we're very excited to hear next steps on that, and I'm sure it'll be amazing whatever you get involved with. So we're going to go into something a little bit different. We're going to do a little lightning round, very, very short list of questions I'm going to ask you, and then I would like to ask you what's coming up next for you that we can talk about, and then also where people can find you online. All right, so we're going to start with a little lightning round. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, favorite medium?
Pastel.
Okay. Favorite Disney movie?
Cinderella.
Okay. Any particular reason why?
Because she was just so gracious and strong, and in the face of such adversity and meanness.
Awesome. Love that movie. Okay. Favorite French swear word? Go.
Putain.
I don't think I'll ask what that is. I'll find out later. My girlfriend speaks French.
Okay.
Favorite Family Circus character?
Dolly.
Okay. Okay. If you could spend the day shadowing any artist, living or dead, who would it be?
Marie Laurencin. She was a painter in the 20s. And she was friends with Picasso and Matisse and all those. And her stuff is gorgeous.
It's Marie who?
Laurencin, Laurencin.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look that up. Awesome. Okay, and then finally, last one. Favorite Disney park ride?
Oh, for sure the Radiator Springs.
What? I don't think I've ever been on that. Is that one of the Cars rides?
Yeah, it's in California Adventures.
Oh, and no wonder.
It is so fun. But we only got onto it this last time because the line wasn't 3 hours long. Normally the line is so long. For some reason, the day that we went, it was only 45 minutes. So we got on.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I do have a new book coming out.
Awesome.
Well, the Blue Day book just came out that I illustrated for Trevor Grieve, Bradley Trevor Grieve. And I have another book, Why, that is so cute. And so Why is a children's book. And
W-H-Y, literally?
Adam Rex wrote it. And it's about a little girl who comes across this supervillain, and she just pummels him with the question why, and it's hysterical. I had so much fun working on it.
That's awesome.
And I also have a book that I'm working on with Mac Barnett. About a little dog in Rome. The name of that book is called Paolo, but that I'm still in the middle of working on it.
And when is that one coming out? You don't know, or?
I think it's coming out next spring, but Why is coming out in October. Awesome.
All right, everybody listen out and look out for that. Excellent. Okay, Claire, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been awesome talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Bye.
All right, folks, that was an amazing podcast. Had such a blast. I hope you guys do take the time to follow Claire at Claire on a Cloud on Instagram and also claireonacloud.com. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. Be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend. Tell lots and lots of friends. Become a leadhead. And we're out.